quite remarkable because I think Mosley is one of the most unique communities in Birmingham, and it has a real sense of identity and belonging, and yet they've decided to cut basically the heart of Mosley out. They've sliced off the sides. We'd be divided into another 5 wards, with just left with the core, which doesn't even have a shop in it.
So we are talking here, so people understand us properly, we are talking about local government, aren't we? We're talking about the wards of local councils.
Yes, we're talking about the wards at the moment, but what happened in 2001-2 was that then they redrew the constituency boundaries, and so it's quite likely that if this follows through, that Mosley will be divided again into different constituencies. And that then has an impact on services and everything else.
So does that mean you're losing bits that you would like? Do you gain any bits that you don't particularly want then?
Well, it's weird that we've got Balsall Heath Park into Mosley, and yet Mosley Park goes into Balsall Heath. We also lose the whole of the shopping area, the whole of the shopping centre. We lose the parish church, which goes into Balsall Heath. And some of our best schools, you know, Queensbridge School becomes part of the new Balsall Heath. And it has an impact if you want to do anything in a community, because to do something in a community, you have to negotiate, talk with councillors, officers. And if you're talking, say you want something for the whole of Mosley, we'll be talking to 5 wards, 6 councillors. And with these other wards, obviously their aspirations and their focus will be on their own centres, not on Mosley on the edge.
So are you saying to me then that Mosley, I mean, it's called Mosley Village, isn't it? Has it got a real old sort of village identity about it?
Yes, it has. It's the last surviving Edwardian shopping centre in Birmingham. It was in the Domesday Book. It retained its village feel until 1911, when Birmingham, like a military campaign, took over a whole load of these villages, and that then jumped Birmingham from being the 3rd city to the 2nd city in Britain. But there was a feeling then, you know, what is Birmingham doing? So it's always had a sense of independence and identity. It used to have its own waterworks, for example.
Yeah, and presumably it once had its own railway station, did it?
Yes, but that would be coming back again in time for HS2.
Right. If we look at this in its broadest sense, presumably the Boundary Commission have been and had a look at it.
Not this time. They did in 2001, because before then we were split and we suffered the consequences, so we know what it's like. But in 2001 we put in a proposal for the whole of Mosley to be considered as one ward, and they walked the area and they said, yes, you are a community and we can recognise these boundaries. And so that's what they did. But this time they haven't walked it. They walked other areas in Birmingham, but they didn't walk Mosley.
So when they come and have a look then, because I have no idea what the answer to this is, I mean, what sort of factors are they taking into consideration? Are they saying, this is a nice community, it should stay as it is, or, well, they don't need that bit, or that doesn't look as though it belongs?
I think that they're looking for, well, in their criteria, obviously they have to deal with numbers, but the second one I think you've got there, it says that it's to have an identifiable community.
Yes, it says it's to improve electoral equality by equalising the number of electors each council represents. So in other words, you don't have somebody who's got sort of 10,000 constituents and somebody who's got 2. They're all going to have roughly the same.
Yes.
Okay. That's doing some of their workload. I'm not sure what else it's going to achieve. And then it says, reflect the community identity, that the pattern of ward should, as far as possible, reflect the interests and identities of local communities, which you must feel at the moment it does.
At the moment it does, but if these proposals go through, then it definitely won't. And it's quite amazing, the feeling that has risen up in Mosley. We were going to distribute 10,000 leaflets across the whole of what is a proposed ward. And we found that within 3-4 days we had almost upwards to 100 people volunteering, a total cross-section of people all saying, I want to help. And we got everything delivered within a couple of days. It was amazing.
Because you always get the feeling, or at least I do, that when something like this crops up, there are a group of people, always very well intentioned, who don't want things to change, because we don't like change anyway, do we? But the majority of people, it's, oh, well, yeah, okay, it's changed. But you're saying to me that so far as Mosley goes at the moment, people really collectively don't want change.
Yeah, that's true. If people don't know about it, they'll think, well, you know, it's just a boundary change. But once they realise the way it could affect them, then they do want to change the proposals.
So is losing the shopping area then, is that the biggest single worry, do you think?
That's one of them, because we have the Mosley CPD. Mosley's quite unique. Oh, the supplementary planning document. For about 7 or 8 years, we discussed with local people as to what they wanted. And we produced this plan. So in other words, it's from the bottom up rather than planners working down.
Okay.
And we produced this plan as to how we would actually change Mosley. And that was accepted by officers and the planning and the councillors. And this commission would actually cut it up. We decided we had to take action. Now, the Boundary Commission, they're not so much interested in petitions as actual evidence, and so we decided we needed to call together all the groups in Mosley and the local representatives of the political parties to actually get them to be able to say how they think it would affect Mosley if this occurs, to gain their support, and then to actually take a vote. And we might have a few hundred, we might have 1,000 there. It's at Queensbridge School, 10:30. And for us, it's probably one of the biggest or most important meetings that Mosley has had for years.
And in fact, Queensbridge School, ironically, you would lose, wouldn't you, from Mosley?
Yes, it would become part of
if that happens,
Heath,
yeah. So that's 10:30 on Saturday morning. As you say, you don't know how many people are going to be there, as one never does in these situations. So far as local politicians go, where do they stand on this, do you think?
Well, it's quite interesting. For example, the Lib Dem proposals were produced by somebody that our local, well, one of the local MPs and our local councillors haven't heard of. And so it was obviously done by somebody who doesn't have any knowledge of or understanding of Mosley community. His proposals would cut us in half horizontally. And our local candidate for the Lib Dems has said it's a daft proposal and is actually supporting ours. The Conservatives, they wanted to be able to have 3 individual wards for Mosley because they felt we were too big, but that obviously divides us vertically. And so they're now re-looking at their proposals, and we're actually pushing them to consider us as a whole. And certainly I know that the candidate is sympathetic. Exactly where he stands, we'll find out on Saturday.
Yeah. So, I mean, in local government terms, what is the population we're talking about here that's affected?
Right. The area which we're actually planning for Mosley, in our proposal, we reckon will be between 14 and 15,000 voters. And so that's about 9,500 households.
Okay. I mean, you just to broaden this a little, I mean, you have been very much involved in a lot of things, haven't you, in 35 years?
Yeah,
you've
35
been in
years
Mosley,
in Mosley,
and the farmers market, which you mentioned in passing earlier, I mean, that's become a real centre of the place, and you were very much involved in all of that, weren't you?
Yes, I helped start, well, I started it with my wife, and it's twice won the award of being the best in the UK. It is an amazing place. What it's done is to help Mosley rediscover its sense of identity and community. It's a social meeting place once a month, you know, the last Saturday of the month, and it really is a reflection of Mosley, and it shows how unique Mosley is. It's such a cross-section of people, and it's a very tolerant, very exciting place to live in, and it is amazing.
And of course, for many, many years, a lot of people, if they knew nothing else, they knew about Mosley Rugby Club, didn't they?
Yes.
And ironically, they were right in the middle of Mosley, weren't they?
They were, and
then they went to the university, so they went out of the patch. Now they're at Bilsby
It was rather
Common.
sad. It's rather sad because they wanted to develop their ground, and the local people were up in arms about the floodlights that were planned. And so Mosley Rugby Club said, well, if you don't want us, we'll go. And so they sold their land for housing. And then all the locals said, no, we want you back. But it was too late. Yep. And then they tried to find a home. Now, they're still in, effectively, part of Mosley, down on what we call the Bilsby Handle, going further south.
So are they in Mosley still or
They're
not?
just about in Mosley.
Just- So on the map you just do a little detour just to make sure you
But they
can
won't be
include
in the
them.
Mosley ward because that'll
Right.
go too far south.
Yeah, it's. I mean, am I being, because I don't know the place that well?
Are we a little bit big-headed?
Well, no, I was thinking more parochial. I think that was probably the word I was going to use, and I don't mean it. Probably sounds a little rude, and I don't mean it to. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Is this a sort of little local difficulty in the greater scheme of things? I mean, do you know of any other areas of Birmingham or the West Midlands where such things are going on?
Well,
like you're
yes,
doing?
there are probably 4 key areas where the Boundary Commission have done something similar. So Hall Green, for example, is up in arms about what's happening with their centre, or lack of it, and they'll be called Tyseley, when Tyseley isn't actually in it. I know there was a meeting last night in Sturchley where they were re-looking at the boundaries. And what we're planning on doing after this big meeting on Saturday, by the way, is to consult with all the wards around us to have a working party to be able to, for us to redraw how we would like the wards to be. Because obviously we can't just say, right, we want this area, because it has a knock-on effect on the others. And so for the Boundary Commission, we want to be able to, in a sense, do their job, to be able to say this is what actually reflects the communities.
Because the interesting thing is that these 3 key points you mentioned too that the Boundary Commission take into account is, one, to reflect community identity. And that's the very point you're making, isn't it? That you've got this very strong community identity in Mosley. People know it, they know the crossroads, they know the farmers market and all the rest of it. And some of that would be lost, would it not?
It would. I mean, it makes a little bit of a mockery of when the Sunday Times, for example, said that Mosley was the best place to live in urban Britain.
They did, didn't they?
And
Were you surprised when they said that?
yes and no.
Proud,
Because
yes, but maybe slightly a bit surprised.
Yes. You know, the fact that we were above Moswell Hill and other places in London.
What reasons did, I can't remember, I do remember the Sunday Times saying this, what reasons did they give for it being the place to be?
One of them was the fact it had a very vibrant community, and that a lot was going on, that it had a very good nightlife as well, in terms of, obviously we've got a lot of restaurants and pubs, and that is just as much a part of Mosley as the daytime economy. And the fact that there was so much going on. And so it's...
How difficult do you think it will be? OK, so you have a big meeting on Saturday, doubtless will be very successful, lots of people having their say, and you'll take your case on. Is there a worry that it'll all be but to no avail?
I would say probably now 80% no, because I've found out that with the Boundary Commission proposals, they have said that there is only one case where they've never made any changes.
Yeah.